The D.B. Cooper hijacking remains one of the most intriguing and baffling unsolved mysteries in modern American history. On November 24, 1971, a man using the alias Dan Cooper, later misidentified as D.B. Cooper, in the press hijacked Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727 flying from Portland, Oregon, to Seattle, Washington. What followed was a sequence of events that, even more than 50 years later, continues to perplex law enforcement, armchair detectives, and mystery enthusiasts alike. The hijacking, a detailed account. It all began on a routine afternoon flight on Thanksgiving Eve, a flight of just 35 passengers and a crew of 6. At approximately 3 p.m., the plane, a Boeing 727, took off from Portland International Airport. Among the passengers was a man in his mid-40s, wearing a suit, who went by the name Dan Cooper. He appeared unremarkable, and by all accounts, he blended in with the other passengers, ordering a bourbon and soda shortly after boarding the plane. Little did anyone know that the quiet, unassuming man would soon change the course of history in a way no one could have anticipated. About 20 minutes into the flight, after the plane reached cruising altitude, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, seated near the rear of the cabin. At first, Schaffner thought the note might be a romantic overture, but she soon discovered the true nature of the message when she opened the folded paper. It read, "I have a bomb. I want $200,000 for parachutes and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane. If my demands are met, no one will get hurt." Schaffner, alarmed, calmly took the note to the cockpit and informed the crew of the situation. The captain, William Scott, and the first officer, Raymond Lockhart, immediately contacted air traffic control, who in turn informed law enforcement. The plane was then diverted to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, where the authorities were ready to meet the hijackers' demands. While the plane circled the airport to give authorities time to prepare, Cooper's demands were promptly met. He received $200,000 in cash, which was delivered to him in $20 bills, as well as the 4 parachutes. The authorities also complied with his request for a fuel truck to be waiting on the runway. At this point, Cooper seemed intent on letting everyone go. He assured the flight attendants that once his conditions were met, he would release the hostages and allow the plane to land safely. However, the situation was far from resolved. Cooper was determined to take matters into his own hands. The escape, jumping into infamy. Once Cooper had his ransom and parachutes, he gave further instructions to the crew. He instructed them to refuel the plane and to take off for a remote area of the Cascade Range. The flight crew complied, but Cooper's true intentions remained unclear. At approximately 8 p.m., the plane, now fully fueled, took off from Seattle and began heading south, toward Reno, Nevada. But Cooper, who had already planned his escape, had other plans. Cooper's demands had included specific instructions regarding the plane's flight configuration. He insisted the plane fly at a relatively low altitude of about 10,000 feet, with the rear stairs deployed, an unusual request that would ultimately play a crucial role. The Boeing 727 was one of the few aircraft with a rear stairway that could be lowered during flight. This stairway would provide the perfect escape route for Cooper. At around 8:13 p.m., the plane's crew received a final communication from Cooper, who confirmed that he was ready to release the hostages. The crew members, unaware of what would happen next, remained in the cockpit, waiting for the flight to resume its normal course. But when they returned to the cabin, they found that Cooper was no longer aboard. By the time the plane had reached a designated location, Cooper had jumped from the rear stairway into the dark night. The only evidence left behind was a black tie and some fingerprints, which would later become important pieces of evidence in the investigation. The investigation begins. In the hours following Cooper's daring escape, law enforcement began to mobilize. FBI agents, local law enforcement, and military personnel immediately launched an extensive search for any signs of Cooper's whereabouts, hoping to find clues that would lead to his capture. The search covered a vast area of the Cascade Mountains, where Cooper was thought to have parachuted into the rugged wilderness. However, despite an intense search effort, no trace of Cooper or the ransom money was found. In the months and years that followed, the FBI pursued numerous leads, but they found no solid evidence linking anyone to the hijacking. They interviewed hundreds of potential suspects and followed up on dozens of theories, but Cooper's true identity remained elusive. The mysterious discovery. The ransom money. It wasn't until 1980, nearly 9 years after the hijacking, that a critical discovery was made. While digging along the Columbia River, a young boy found $5,800 in decaying bills that matched the serial numbers of the ransom money given to Cooper. The discovery of this money reignited interest in the case, but it also raised more questions than answers. While the find was an important clue, it only deepened the mystery. The bills had been buried in a way that suggested Cooper had hidden the money at some point, but it was unclear whether he had ever returned for it. The discovery of the money suggested that Cooper had either died shortly after his jump or that he had gotten away with the crime and buried the money as part of his escape. Theories and suspects over the years. Various theories about Cooper's identity and fate have been proposed. Some believe that Cooper died shortly after jumping from the plane, while others think that he may have survived and lived out the rest of his life in hiding. Others suspect that Cooper might have had some military or parachuting experience, given the precision with which he executed his escape. 1. The theory of Cooper's death. Many believe that Cooper did not survive the jump, due to the dangerous conditions and the fact that the plane was flying at a low altitude in the middle of a winter storm. The rough terrain of the Cascade Mountains and the possibility that Cooper was unprepared for the harsh conditions could have contributed to his demise. Some investigators also speculate that Cooper may have been injured during the jump, and that he perished shortly afterward, never having had the opportunity to enjoy the ransom money. 2. The survival theory. Others contend that Cooper had some knowledge of parachuting and was able to survive the jump. They suggest that he had a well-thought-out escape plan and knew how to avoid being captured. Some believe he might have hidden the ransom money and escaped into the wilderness, possibly assuming a new identity and evading capture for the rest of his life. One popular theory is that Cooper may have used his experience as a military parachutist or skydiver, which would have helped him execute the jump with precision. His careful planning of the jump and his calm demeanor during the hijacking suggest that he had some specialized knowledge. 3. The suspects. Over the years, several suspects have been named in connection with the case. Some of the most famous suspects include Richard McCoy Jr., a former military man who hijacked a plane in 1972, almost exactly a year after Cooper's heist. McCoy's escape methods were eerily similar to Cooper's, and some investigators believe that McCoy might have been Cooper, though the FBI has never found conclusive evidence linking him to the crime. Kenneth Christensen, a former Northwest Orient Airlines employee, Christensen became a prime suspect after an extensive investigation into his background. He had parachuting experience and was working for the airline at the time of the hijacking. Though circumstantial evidence pointed toward him, nothing definitive has ever been found. Lynn Doyle Cooper. In 2018, a woman named Lynn Doyle Cooper was linked to the hijacking by her own niece, who claimed that her uncle, Cooper, had been responsible for the hijacking. While this theory gained some traction in the media, it has not been substantiated by any concrete evidence. The ongoing mystery and final thoughts. Despite decades of investigation and countless theories, the true identity and fate of D.B. Cooper remain unsolved. The FBI officially closed its investigation in 2016, but the case continues to captivate the public imagination, and it remains a fixture in the world of unsolved mysteries. Every few years, new theories and new suspects emerge, adding to the growing legend of the man who disappeared into thin air. What makes the D.B. Cooper hijacking so intriguing is not just the audacity of the crime, but also the mystery surrounding it. Cooper executed a well-planned, seemingly flawless heist, and then vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and speculation. Did he die after jumping from the plane? Or did he escape into the wilderness with the ransom money? Will we ever know the truth behind the hijacking? As time passes, the mystery of D.B. Cooper may never be fully solved, but the story of his daring escape will continue to fascinate and baffle those who seek to uncover the truth behind one of the greatest unsolved crimes in American history.